to think really hard in the last 10 minutes or so about how we're going to turn this into action. And we'll finish off with an invitation to stay involved and stay as part of this conversation. So the wonderful people that you get at this conference just pick up these things very, very quickly. And you're already introducing yourselves in the chat box and the conversation box. But if you haven't yet, or you've only done the first part of this, it would be great to hear from you. So who are you? Where are you from? And we're particularly interested in this being a real sort of global conversation. So please do let us know a little bit about where you're from, what your role is. And then we've got a couple of questions just to get everybody warmed up. So an example of where you have seen kindness lead to something really good. And then a really important one, what most interests you about kindness? What are you most curious to explore further? And I think one of the things that's been exciting for all of us on this conversation is it takes all sorts of shapes and forms and heads off into all sorts of interesting places and spaces. So your name, where are you from, what your role is, an example of where you've seen kindness lead to something good, and what most interests you about kindness, what are you most curious to explore? And it'd be great to get that in on the conversation. I can't keep up with it. It's whizzing away to my left in a fantastic fashion. So what I'm going to do while you continue to do that is catch you up on the conversation and explain this conversation a little bit more and where we've got to. But just to sort of reassure, really, I think it's very early days. You've missed a few minutes of this conversation, and I think we're going to be able to catch you up nice and quickly and easily. So the story behind this is a rather lovely one, in that we were the group of people you've got on the call, and the wonderful Susie Bailey, who can't be with us today, were preparing for the Copenhagen International Forum workshop on kindness that was meant to be in May 2020, but had been moved to November last year. And being good, organised, thoughtful people, we got together in about August time and said, right, we better start planning this workshop because we know we're going to have a lot of people there and it's going to be something that's interesting to them. So we started to put in these monthly planning calls. And we were planning away and getting what felt like a decent old workshop together. And that happened in August and in September and in October. And in that final meeting before the November workshop, and we were thinking about, well, what's going to happen after this workshop? And we came up with this idea to say, look, it's been such fun to meet together as a group who are passionate about this, to try and explore what would go into this workshop. Why don't we keep meeting? Why don't we keep having this conversation? And the worst possible thing that would happen is we will carry on our conversation as the 6 or 7 of us who are talking away. And it had been so wonderful, we thought that would be good. But let's open it up and see what happens. And that sort of opening up of this really sort of spiraled out of, well out of control, I would say, and got us into a fantastic space where we were convening 40, 50, 60 people on the third Thursday of the month to listen, to learn, to think differently, and to really mobilize together for action. A great sense of sharing of resources. I think a real sense of sharing of energy as well. And all of us across the globe at that time were heading on into really difficult second waves of COVID. And I think many of us on the call found this, a one moment in the month where we could reflect and focus on some of the sort of well-being thinking that we've been hearing about through the forum over the last 3 days. And it just had this tone and approach that everyone's welcome. And I really want to start with that, as you're going to get an invite to this at the end. I'm giving you the punchline of the end of this workshop. And we really want everybody to be welcome. So just have a little look here. This map covers 22 countries of people who we've had contribute. And what I'm hoping is that somebody here is a 23rd country and a 24th country. So if you are sitting somewhere that you think, hang on, our bit of the map isn't yet orange, please put this in the conversation here and put your name down and some contact details, and we'll get in touch with you. And it would be great to extend this up. I reckon we might be able to get to 30 countries by the end of this workshop, which would be rather wonderful. And I've named at the bottom here some of our fantastic facilitators. So the format that we've got into is that each session is facilitated by a pair of people or by somebody who has got a particular angle or some particular learning to share, and they maybe talk for about 10 minutes or so, and then we spend the rest of the time trying to make sense and build on what they've heard. And again, I'm not going to go through the detail of it, but gives you a sense of some of the people who have been contributing so far. And the aim is that anybody who comes to be part of this will find you a month to come and talk and share your thinking and ideas. So where have we got to in terms of the themes and the topics? So this slide here just summarizes some of the key concepts that we have been thinking about. And any of you who came in November will have seen a slide that looked a little bit similar to this, but the words have moved and changed as new things have come up. So we went into this pretty convinced that there is a leadership role around kindness, and that together we can lead for kindness and we can grow kindness. Undoubtedly, the more work we've done on this, the more we realize that kindness is a choice of action. And this idea around really moving it into the behavior and the do and the action becomes really, really clear. The more work we've done on this, the more we realize there is very, very good evidence out there that kindness leads to better outcomes. We're going to be hearing next month from Len Berry, who's done wonderful work around this in the concept of cancer. David Feiberg's been doing randomized controlled trials demonstrating some of the impact around this. And there's many others who are showing that kindness absolutely leads to better outcomes. So that hunch, that intuition that you think it should do, there's good evidence out there to back you up. This idea that we mustn't frame kindness as being the soft and fluffy thing on the side, but actually kindness is core. Kindness is healthcare. Kindness is right in at the business end, and a deliberate use of the word business there to sort of knock the constant focus around money. And money is absolutely important. But if you don't have kindness, forget it. You can have all the money in the world. You're not going to have a great healthcare system. This really interesting idea that kindness links to and leads to so much else. People like John Ballot, Penny Campling really started to write about the cycles of kinship and how that drives attunement and kindness and therapeutic benefit. And the more of this we've done, we realize it knocks into so much else. This has been a wonderful week around what matters to you. The links there feel really strong. I'm going to touch on a link to psychological safety, those of you who heard from Amy Edmondson yesterday. A hard-edged bit about challenging unkindness being a critical part of the story, and how do we get ourselves in a space where we're able to do that. This lovely idea that small acts of kindness can have a big impact, but that systems of care can be built around kindness. And you may well hear a little bit more around that to follow. So without getting into too much detail of everything we've covered over the last 6 to 9 months, I hope this gives you a sense of where the conversations have been, and you now feel like you're right up top with the conversation. So just to get you going a little bit more, I've got some wonderful friends who are expert storytellers, and I'm going to kick off by passing the ball on to Maureen, who's going to tell us a little story.
Thanks, Bob. And we clearly are on a learning journey about this, but it's one of the most exciting things that I have learned about in my career. One of the things I've been focused on is learning about the differences between empathy and kindness. And I've learned that there are 3 different kinds of empathy. First is cognitive empathy. That's when you clearly understand, you can see and you know what someone else is going through. So cognitive empathy means you see and you know what someone else is experiencing. Emotional empathy is when you share what they're going through. It's not just what, it's how they're feeling. And the third is empathic concern, and that's when you want to do something. So, but what I've learned is, even from the scientists, is that empathy, the primary role of empathy is to inspire kindness. As Bob said, kindness is the action, empathy is the feeling. And neuroscience is even telling us that when you have empathy and you see someone who's going through something, what that does is it triggers a part of your brain where you feel their pain. It actually triggers the part of your brain that makes you feel pain and you feel depressed. But when you do something, when you take an action, it inspires a totally different part of your brain. And that makes you feel good. So really, it's not just that you're doing good, it's that you're doing good for yourself. You're actually feeling better as you reach out and do something. And as Bob said, the science behind all of this has really been so enlightening and inspiring. There's been work done, as an example, by anesthesiologists studying the physiology of kindness just before a patient goes into the operating room. And when an anesthesiologist walks out, puts his or her hand on a patient's arm and says, "My name's Maureen, I'm going to be your anesthesiologist. I'll be with you the whole time you're in surgery. Don't worry, you won't have pain. I'm with you, and I'll make sure that you're safely back here as quickly as we can." That 40 seconds of interaction actually decreases the amount of anesthesia the patient needs in the operating room, decreases the amount of pain medication they need afterward, and shortens their length of stay. So kindness has all kinds of impacts, not only on the patient, but on us. And as we're burned out, the more that we can actually act with kindness, the more that we're actually taking care of ourselves. I'm going to turn it over to Göran and Annette.
Thank you, Maureen. And it's a great pleasure for us to join this session today. And we will take you, Göran and I myself, to our video blog, where we will give you an appetizer of talk we have done with different people from different places in the world about kindness. And if you are curious and want to listen to the whole talk and also to other voices, please visit the video blog. You will find it on Kulturum's video blog for kindness. But now, Göran, are we ready?
Yes, we are. Please help us to start the video.
My name is Annette Nilsson, and I work in the region Jönköping with Future Healthcare. I also work part of my time at the national level within a big-scale co-production program named Patient Compact. And today we will talk a little about kindness and also rekindling. So, Göran Henriks, over to you. Who are you? And please also introduce some thoughts from you around this topic.
Thank you, Annette. My name is Göran Henriks, and I work as a Chief Executive of Learning and Innovation. And Annette, we have over the last 6 months worked with a video blog and tried to live pay it forward ideas around kindness. And why kindness for us makes so much sense is because with kindness people can find energy in relationships to others. And I think this brings hope for so many people when the relationship also involves the basic or the strengths of kindness, really. Now, kindness also gives other people a chance to happiness and curiosity. And with curiosity, you also make your mindset more in a rekindling mood, where rekindling helps you to find your dreams and come back to what is important for you. Now we will have a chance to see some people, how they define kindness and rekindling. And I hope that that can contribute to the movement of kindness.
Yes.
There weren't many interventions, so one of the key weapons they had against disease was compassion, empathy, and kindness. And that was what they had, besides many things that didn't work. But one thing that did work was empathy, kindness, compassion. Over the last 5 to 6 years, there's been the growth of the person over the patient. Mm. And so as soon as we start accepting that the people we see are not patients, they are people, persons who so happen to have a condition that causes them to come to see us, then we have to realize that that we can't just be technological and treat disease, we are treating the whole person.
When you look at our background today, you see a lot of different personas, and I think it's a huge difference if you see your staff, you see your managers, you see your residents in the county. It's not a patient. You know the name of the patient. You know Britt-Marie, you know Esther, you know the different needs of those persons. And I think that's important for us to know each other, to know their names, and not talking about patients, residents, staff members, and so on. We have the name, and when we have that, we have a special care need. We want to know more. We want to listen. We want to learn to help us lead in the best way.
Well, kindness to me is to really see the best out of everything, every person, every moment, and what people do in their work in the healthcare center. So I try to see every day, every week, what is there that I can encourage and see that is good. And I also like that to be spread, because if I get more encouragement and good support and positive feedback, that will also affect the healthcare. Because, you know, if you're seen by your boss, that also comes right through when you see your patient. Because in the patient's meeting, that's also very important. Of course, it's a medical meeting, but it's very much about to see the person, the patient, and be kind to the person and create an atmosphere that gives you a good relation and a good consultation.
Always have to be aware of your fire, because if you leave it, it'll die. So there's a level of awareness, of self-observation that we have to keep, and, you know, it's in this theme of we can be in service to others, but we need to have a sustainable self. We need to have a person there to be able to help. And so for me, the first part of it is keeping my eye on how I'm doing, because to rekindle the fire, you have to see when those last they still have to be live wood, you know, with heat. If it's died, you can't rekindle it. It's very different. You know, you have to restart it, which would be a different process. But if you go and put a log on a fire that has some kindles, then it starts to ignite again. And that is what is important.
You know, rekindling is about that second group of metaphors. I think it's about people coming together with shared with shared purpose, building community for a different hopeful future. And connected to that, Göran, is a word that you used, which is energy. You know, and in a sense, to rekindle is to ignite energy.
Thank you very much, all friends that were on the video. Now I'm passing on to Gabby and James. Are you there, Gabby?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Göran. So me and James have, just like everybody else, been on a little bit of a journey. So at the last forum, we spoke about any act of kindness, no matter how small, having an impact. And I think through the series of monthly chats that Bob mentioned earlier, we've moved to thinking about you actually need to be in a system where you have the agency to be kind, and that systems can play a really key role in inducing kindness often. So I'm going to hand over to James to share a little bit of the thinking that we've been doing.
Thank you very much, Gabby, and hello, everyone. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic to have 160 odd people from so many countries live with us. And do come and join us in the dialogues to follow. More on that later. I just want to give you a tiny little story from the last monthly session that we had. And it was from a medical colleague in the UK who was just describing walking along a corridor one day, and there were some people who were folding linen in the corridor. And they were focused on their work, but they weren't looking terribly happy. And she just made some remark about how tight the creases were. and what a professional job they were doing. And she told this story about how their faces lit up, big smiles, and it had clearly made a difference to their day. Clearly costless, cost about 2 seconds of time. But what was just fascinating was in watching this lady tell the story, it was really clear that she had been refilling her own tank and that she was being kind to herself. So, as it says on the slide, no matter how small, this has an impact, and we think it goes both ways. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, we want to think about how kindness could be built into systems and organizations as a structural thing. Bob mentioned the hospital he works at, one of a number of hospitals in England that have well over 10,000 staff. And in total, we've got nearly 1.5 million people employed in the NHS in the UK. So how could you build in kindness systematically to their daily reality? It's quite a shocking image up on the screen now. In the year that I was born, more than double the number of Americans said that they disapproved of interracial marriage compared to approving. Now, happily, those lines have now followed the trends that they have been on. But I was really quite shocked when I saw this. And the thought it prompted, I happened to see it as I'd just been thinking about, how do we frame this talk? And the thought it prompted was, well, what seems normal today, what we take for granted, whether it's right or wrong, doesn't have to be how things are, and society's norms can shift radically. Here are some others that have changed more recently. So in 2006, Ireland was the first country in the world to ban smoking in pubs. If you had said to me during the 90s, and I'm rather ashamed to say I can remember standing up at university as a medical student and saying that banning smoking in the college bar, which was an underground airless basement, would effectively be a human rights violation. So we all learn during life. But if you'd said to me then in the 90s that it would be illegal to smoke in an Irish pub in 2005, 2006, and we went the same way in Britain, and how shocking it is now to most of us when we go into a bar somewhere where smoking is allowed. So the world can change quite radically. Wearing seatbelts as another example. We take it absolutely as normal. So how about this as a proposition? What if it is as unacceptable to be unkind as a caregiver, as somebody who's a manager in healthcare, or indeed perhaps as a patient receiving care? What if it's as unacceptable to be unkind as it is to smoke in those environments? There's a thought to noodle on. Gabby, back to you.
Thanks, James. So yeah, when we were thinking of systems that can they induce or facilitate kindness, I was thinking about an experience I had recently. So as a fifth-year medical student, I cycled through different placements, and I've now done that for over a year. Fifth year is slightly longer than a year. And I just spent 3 weeks in a sexual health clinic. And sexual health in the NHS is quite unique. Patients have a lot of choice. They can go to wherever they want to be treated. It doesn't have to be in their local area, and it's not funded based on their GP. Yeah. And it's an incredibly vulnerable moment, as you can imagine. They ask you about your sexual history, your partners. It's a key moment to ask about domestic violence or abuse. And I realised that I'd never felt more comfortable in a clinical environment. And I spoke to my other medical students, and I spoke to some member of the nurses and the medical team, and they felt the same, that actually because they had to act in such an open way with their patients were so vulnerable, and they too, in asking those questions, kind of shared that moment. They too felt that it was an incredibly kind, open and welcoming environment to be in, and where they could be themselves as fully as they wanted to, because they had to accept their patients in themselves and in every way they were. So me and James took to Twitter with limited success, actually. So we kind of wanted to bring the question here, is what systems have you seen, or systems that you've been a part of or work in or lead, where you believe that you induce or build in kindness, whether it's built in into how you treat your patients and as such has effects on the staff, or whether it's built in into staff lifestyle, so well-being or the rota, and then that has an impact on the patient, because I think they're really closely interlinked. And now I'm going to hand over to Bob to round up that and some of his thinking around psychological safety.
Thanks so much, Gabby and James. Wow, two fantastic stories. And I think a real thread for me is around learning. And that's where I want to try and take the conversation on as well. So I'm just going to think a little bit about the concepts of psychological safety. And some of you will know this very well, and others may have met it for the first time yesterday in hearing from Amy Edmondson and her wonderful talk, and really grounding psychological safety around leadership. But I want to tie it into kindness, and I want to start with a really story and a story of self. And as I put in my introductory comments, I'm a pediatrician, a general pediatrician, and one aspect of my work is around being the attending consultant on the ward, on a wonderful ward, Great Western Ward at St Mary's in Paddington. And I had very good training through my university and medical school and postgraduate training in and around London, and learned lots of good tips and tricks and medicine. But the thing that nobody ever really taught me was what the leadership on a ward was all about. And I think in my early days as a consultant, I thought that I was there to try to come up with clever answers around the diagnosis and management of the children who were there, and maybe deal with a few sort of team issues and try to communicate really well. And yes, all those things are important, but 12 years into being a consultant, I'm really down to sort of the essence of what my role is to try to create an environment in which everyone around me can thrive. And that is in essence, in sort of Bob pediatrician language, what Amy Edmondson was talking about around psychological safety. How do you create a sense where everybody can perform at their best, where people can ask questions that might be wrong, where people can double check things, and all of that sort of piece. And you realize that the action that most gets you to psychological safety when you're the attending consultant on a ward is kindness. It's the single biggest trick and action that I have in order to try and get me there. So just in case you missed Amy's talk, I just want to Amy's talk is available to go and play back on, and her book here, The Fearless Organisation, is well worth a look. But the other area of learning that I've gained from this is going and having a look at Project Aristotle, which is a really interesting bit of work that Google did for very commercial reasons. They wanted to work out how their teams could perform in the best possible way, and ran a deep piece of qualitative research that ran over a couple of years, involved nearly 40,000 employees and just short of a couple of hundred teams. And these 5 bars here are the things that came up top as being key. So there's something about impact. Team members need to see and feel their work matters and leads to change. We've seen lots of that when you think about joy in work and the work around that. Meaning, really key part. How do you make work meaningful? There's something about making sure people have got clear structure and clarity about their work. There's something about dependability, that team members are able to deliver high quality work. But right up at the top of the list, the most important thing of all was psychological safety. So this idea that you can use kindness as an action as your most accessible and easiest tool to create psychological safety as a leader feels a really strong and important one. So we've given you loads of ideas and thoughts. We've caught you up on the conversation. We've put a few provocations in and thoughts. I'm really grateful to Maureen and Joran, Annette, Gabby, who's going to lead you along with Joe into 2 parts of sense making. So the first bit is going to be some breakouts, which Joe's going to lead, and then Dominique's going to do a fishbowl with you. So Joe, you're going to lead us into some breakouts.
Thanks, Bob. That's great. I just want to say what fantastic stories and insights my colleagues have shared so far, and I hope you've all enjoyed listening to them. So now it's over to all of you to really step back and think about, what does that mean to me? What are my reactions to that? What am I reflecting on? So as Bob said, we're going to go through 2 activities with you. The second is a fishbowl. So 2 questions for the breakout groups. They were both on the screen, but really